Hi, welcome back to Foliage Loft. My name is Liam, and today I'm going to give you my list of my favorite plants of 2020. First off, I'd just like to say thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. This year, my fascination with tropical houseplants really took off. I think I started the year with just about 10 plants, and now, as of recording, it's about the end of 2020 right now, I have almost 60 plants. I started watching some YouTube care videos about my existing houseplants. They're all super helpful in helping me take care of my first few plants. I think those YouTubers really showed me how rewarding and entertaining the hobby could be. So most of the plants that I own right now are pretty popular, very inexpensive and common houseplants. You can find them just about anywhere. So today I'm going to go through my list. I narrowed it down to 5 of my favorite houseplants of 2020. So I think number 1 on my list has to go to the most prolific grower that I have, and that is the Monstera Adansonii. And although this plant is fairly common now, it was actually pretty hard to find here in Canada during the lockdown. So when I bought it, it came in an 8-inch hanging basket, but after hanging in my window for a month or two, it was really starting to get out of control. It was pretty wild, and some of the vines were kind of coming out sideways and really taking up a lot of space. And after doing some research on this plant, I learned that this plant actually really wants to climb up and not really hang down so much. So I decided to repot it, put it in a large terracotta pot, and give it a nice long cocoa coir pole to climb up. So you can see some of these vines have made their way up the pole and are now starting to come back down. So some of these vines have actually grown almost 6 feet in just over 6 months, so it's just an absolutely incredible grower. I really like the organized chaos that this plant offers. It's still very contained when it's attached to its pole, but it has this really wild, jungly look about it. I really like that. And it obviously has these unique fenestrations, which are these holes. And I've actually had people ask me, like, is your plant supposed to look like that? Like, do you have some wild caterpillars running amok in your apartment eating your leaves? And the answer is no. The plant is actually supposed to look this way, and it's actually pretty interesting. The most supported theory for why these holes or fenestrations exist in the leaf is that it allows the leaf to grow to a larger overall size, and this plant grows primarily on the forest floor in a rainforest, and there's actually not much light that reaches the ground in these really large forests because of all the trees above. And so the theory is that these leaves have holes so they can actually grow to a larger size, and they're able to collect more of that precious sunlight in the dark forest floor. In its natural habitat in Central and South America, these plants can grow absolutely massive, and this is why their genus is called Monstera. So I use this plant as a pretty main decor feature in my living room. It sits right next to my TV. I think this is one of the best plants to go for if you're really looking for that jungle look. And it's also a really easy plant to take care of as well. So I've already propagated this plant several times. So the one downstairs by my TV, that's the main original mother plant. This right here is one of the plants that I cloned from that. So this is just a small guy in a terracotta, kind of a taller terracotta pot. And this is not the only propagation that I've taken from that mother plant. I think I had 2 other ones, one of them which I sold, and one of them I gave away as a gift. You know, when they're smaller, like this guy, they look really good on like a side table. So this, the Monstera Adansonii, is number 1 on my top 5 plants of 2020. So although most of 2020 has been kind of touch and go for me with this plant, the Alocasia Poly, or Alocasia Amazonica, as it's sometimes referred to, is my number 2 most favorite plant of 2020. So for any of you watching this that know me personally, you probably know that I'm a huge heavy metal fan, and this has got to be the most heavy metal plant I've ever seen. It's awesome. You know, it's just so dark and spooky and gothic looking. It's just absolutely unreal. So you might look at this and maybe think that, you know, nature might be too good to be true sometimes, and in this case you're actually correct. This is not a naturally occurring plant. It doesn't grow naturally wild anywhere in the world. It's actually a hybrid created at a plant nursery between 2 different species of Alocasia. And it was created at this nursery in the 1950s, and ever since then it's been a pretty popular houseplant, and I think for good reason. I mean, if you look at this, I think the first word that comes to mind describing it is that it's so striking, just so unusual and alien looking. It's got these really cool kind of arrow-shaped leaves, and it's got this deep, almost black, kind of green coloring on the top of the leaf. And this is one of those plants that's just amazing to look at from any angle. I mean, looking from the top, you have these amazing pale veins that run through the leaf, and even on the underside of the leaf, you have a similar kind of pale veining structure, but you also have this really interesting, almost deep purple kind of color on the bottom of the leaf. So when I received this plant, I actually had this shipped to me from a company called Tails and Scales. So they ship live plants, and when I received it, it was a little bit beat up. You know, some of the leaves had a little bit of mechanical damage on there, so little tears or imperfections in the leaf. And the plant also didn't come in any kind of pot when I had it shipped to me, so it was shipped as a bare root plant where you have to basically just pot up the plant yourself. And this was pretty early on my houseplant days. I didn't really know too much, so I just put this in a mixture of Pro Mix potting soil. And that's a peat-based potting soil, and it was just far too dense and held on to way too much water for this plant, and ended up having a little bit of root rot on this plant. So when it came to me, I think it had about 4 or 5 leaves when it came to me. And one by one, each leaf just, started browning up and turning to mush, so I had to cut it way back and all the way back down to just a single leaf, just barely hanging on. And I let the plant completely dry out for a few days, and then I gave it a good watering, and I noticed it was drying out much quicker. And within about a month or two, I think I saw a new leaf forming, so now I have a 2-leaf plant, and I think it's doing a lot better. It's a lot happier now. And you can see I have it sitting on a pebble tray, just for a little bit of extra humidity. I've put my hydrometer by the pebble tray and it sits around 50%, and it seems to be doing pretty well at that, so I'm going to leave it there. So yeah, this is number 2 on my list of my favorite plants of 2020. So number 3 on my list is the Syngonium Podophyllum Albo. So this amazing plant just barely squeaked onto my list, not because I don't like it, but because I only just got it. I bought this plant a few days ago, and it's going to be my last plant purchase of 2020. So while this one is not as rare as some of your Albo monsteras or maybe some of the more exotic anthuriums, this is definitely a step up for me in terms of picking up a rare plant. It's definitely the most rare plant that I have in my collection and the most expensive so far. And these guys are actually pretty hard to find in Canada still. So yeah, I've never seen this plant at a plant shop or a plant nursery before. I was lucky enough to have a collector in my local city. They had one for sale, so I reached out and I was able to purchase it from them. And since I've only really had this plant for a few days, I can't really comment too much on the care for this plant. I've done a little bit of reading, and it seems to be pretty easy to take care of overall. I know the top layer of soil should dry out. It likes kind of moderate humidity levels, and it wants bright indirect light, so pretty much in line with most of the other plants that I have. This plant is actually potted in some sphagnum moss, which is a new growing medium to me. I've never used it before. It can be pretty easy to overwater if you have sphagnum moss as your medium sometimes, so I'm going to be a little bit careful when I water this one, but I'll allow it to root further and maybe push out a leaf or two before I repot this one. So you can see the beautiful white variegation is the main reason why I bought this plant. I think it's just a complete work of art. Looking at it, it's just absolutely amazing. So this is a pretty small cutting, so there's only the 2 leaves on here right now. I also really like the shapes of these leaves. It's got a really interesting kind of arrow shape to it, and that's mainly why the common name for this plant is the arrowhead vine. So I've seen some examples of more mature versions of this plant online, obviously much bigger plants with more leaves, and they can look absolutely beautiful. So I'm really excited to watch this one grow in 2021, and I'll keep you guys updated. So number 4 on my list for 2020 is the String of Hearts. So this is another plant that I got pretty early on. I think it's actually very similar to the Monstera Adansonii, just in the way that it just loves to grow. It's just constantly growing. Even in winter right now, it's putting out new leaves. And I've already trimmed this plant back once, and it's already gotten to be about another maybe 4 feet long right now. I have this guy on a plant shelf in my living room, and I might actually have to find a new spot for it soon because it's almost getting too long to sit on the shelf. These thick, succulent, heart-shaped leaves are just amazing. I just love the patterns and colors that are on these guys, and there's almost like a shiny iridescence to some of the leaves, And if the light kind of comes in and hits it at the right angle, the leaves will almost kind of shine or sparkle. It's pretty neat. And this is also a plant that has rhizomes. So I talked a little bit about rhizomes in my ZZ plant video. So yeah, the rhizomes on this plant function in a very similar way to the ones in the ZZ plant. They're a little bit smaller, but they store water and energy underneath the soil for the plant. So this is a plant that really thrives on neglect. Don't really have to water it too often. I have it in some coco coir and a terracotta pot here, so this one does dry out pretty quick. So in the summer I'll water this one about once a week. But lately in the winter I've only been watering this one about once every 2 to 3 weeks. So yeah, the scientific name for this plant is Ceropegia woodii, which almost sounds like it's from like Middle Earth or something. It's really interesting sounding, and I think that kind of mysterious and fantastical name is really befitting of this plant. It was discovered on a mountaintop in Africa in the 1800s, and very quickly people realized this would be a great houseplant. It really thrives on neglect. You don't have to do too much to it. Because this plant does have some of those succulent type leaves, you really do want a soil that will drain out quickly. So this is a coco coir and pumice, what I usually use. This plant will also flower. So the flowers can start, way up here at the crown, and they can come all the way down the leaves. Earlier this year I had at one point there was like a dozen flowers on this thing, and it looked really, really nice. And the flowers almost kind of remind me of like a pitcher from a pitcher plant. Same kind of shape, obviously they provide a very different function on this plant, but they're very unique looking. Yeah, this is number 4, the string of hearts. And my final spot on my top 5 plants of 2020 goes to the Begonia Maculata, otherwise known as the angel wing begonia. So this plant was featured in a plant haul video I did back in October, and I've been really enjoying it ever since. This plant has been super easy to care for. It's pushed out, probably 7 or 8 new leaves since I got it back in October. I think it's kind of similar to the Alocasia Poly, just in the fact that the appearance is so striking. I got these really interesting, like kind of dagger-shaped leaves. Obviously the polka dots on the front are incredible, and then the kind of the color on the back is really underrated too. It's like deep burgundy color, very, very cool. And this plant is my first begonia. I didn't really have much of an interest in begonias until I saw this plant, but now that I kind of appreciated this one, I'm definitely in the market for some more for 2021. And this is definitely a plant that I'm going to have to trim, and I'll probably propagate it as well. It's growing so fast, I'm going to have to cut it back at some point. I bought this plant from a dedicated plant shop, and if you can, I would definitely encourage you guys to do the same thing. You're always going to get healthier plants and better customer service in a dedicated plant shop as opposed to going into like a Lowe's or Home Depot. And I think right now more than ever it's super important to support your local small businesses and try to buy your plants from them when you can. So right now this plant has the spot of honor on my office desk. So whenever I'm doing some work on my computer, if I'm editing or doing research or whatever, I can always just look over and kind of enjoy this plant. It's been doing so well in the gloomy winter days. Maybe you get like an hour or 2 of sunlight a day right now. It's ridiculous. But I'm just really excited to see how this one will take off when the growing season actually starts in the spring. But yeah, my final spot on my favorite plants of 2020 goes to the Begonia Maculata. So I've been off work for the past week or so, so I had a little bit more time this week to plan, shoot, and edit this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching my favorite plants of 2020, and I really look forward to filming more content for you guys in 2021. And again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. See ya.